Okay, so are you ready to like really just dive into this article?
Yeah,
Toxic by design?
absolutely.
It's
Big claims.
yeah, making some pretty bold claims about the pharmaceutical industry,
Yeah,
suggesting that they might be prioritizing profits
right.
over actually helping people get healthy.
That's right. And it's not just some random theory either.
Yeah.
The authors Paul Leonard and Dr. Mikhail Kozurin
Mhm.
have serious backgrounds in biotech and medical research. They're
Right.
not just pointing fingers.
Yeah.
They're offering a pretty deep critique of how drugs are developed and what might be wrong with the system.
This isn't light reading.
No.
We're gonna get into some fascinating science,
Absolutely.
but it does make you think differently about the medications we all rely on.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
the authors start by breaking down some cellular biology. They want to make sure we understand how our bodies work at a really fundamental level before we can even start talking about how drugs interact with us.
Right, and that starts with these things called GPCRs.
That's right.
Right, I'll admit I had to look that one up.
G, protein-coupled receptors.
Okay.
Think of them like highly specialized locks on the surface of your cells.
Okay.
Each one is designed to receive a very specific signal,
Okay.
kind of like a chemical message.
So there are all these different signals floating around our bodies.
Yes.
And each one has a specific GPCR. It fits into like a key.
Exactly. And these signals trigger all sorts of essential processes.
Wow.
Everything from regulating your heart rate to how your cells grow and communicate.
Okay.
The article mentions there are over 800 different types of GPCRs in the human genome,
Oh my God.
which is mind-blowing when you think about the complexity of what's happening inside us all the time.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But how does this relate to drugs?
Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
Almost half of all FDA-approved drugs actually target these GPCRs. They're designed to either mimic or block those natural signaling molecules
Okay.
called agonists.
Okay, hold on. What exactly is an agonist?
It's the natural key that fits into those cellular locks we were talking about.
Got it.
It triggers a specific response within the cell.
Okay.
Think of it like adrenaline. That's a natural agonist that binds to specific GPCRs
Yeah.
and causes your heart to race and your senses to sharpen.
So some drugs are designed to act like adrenaline,
Right.
essentially triggering the same response.
But that's where the authors start to raise concerns.
Okay.
They argue that synthetic drugs, the
Right.
ones created in a lab,
Well-
are fundamentally different from those natural agonists,
Okay.
even if they're aiming for the same target.
What do you mean different?
Wow.
Don't they achieve the same result?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And that difference, the authors say, is a big part of why so many drugs have side effects.
Okay.
They use a really vivid analogy to explain this. They say synthetic drugs are like grabbing onto those cellular locks with just 3 or 4 fingers,
Okay.
while a natural agonist makes contact with dozens of points.
So it's like trying to open a complex lock with a crude tool.
Yeah.
It might work sometimes,
Yeah.
but you're likely to damage the lock in the process.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And that damage, in the context of our bodies, can translate to side effects, sometimes even serious ones.
Okay, I'm starting to see where they're going with this.
Yeah.
But where does quantum mechanics come into play?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They argue that even at the subatomic level,
Mm-hmm.
processes like electron transfer and photon absorption in our cells
Okay.
are governed by quantum mechanics.
Wow.
These tiny, subtle events influence how those natural agonists interact with our cells,
Okay.
and they're incredibly precise.
So our understanding of quantum mechanics is changing how we view biology,
Absolutely.
even at the smallest level.
The authors suggest that the effectiveness and precision of natural processes, like these are directly related to these quantum effects.
Wow.
And when we try to replicate those processes with synthetic drugs, we're essentially missing a huge part of the picture.
It's like we've been trying to write a symphony with only a few notes.
Yeah.
When the real music is happening at a level we're just beginning to understand.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the authors argue that this difference in design,
Okay.
the clunky synthetic drug
Yeah.
versus the elegant natural agonist,
Right.
is a root cause of many of the problems we see with pharmaceuticals.
Like the toxicity issues.
Exactly, because these synthetic drugs aren't interacting with our bodies
Right.
in the same way natural molecules do.
Yeah.
They're much more likely to cause unintended consequences.
This makes me wonder if natural agonists are so much more effective
Yeah.
and potentially less harmful.
Right.
Why aren't we using them more in medicine?
That's a great question. And the authors spent a lot of time addressing. They believe there's a systemic bias against natural therapies, especially within the current pharmaceutical industry.
So what they're saying is that the way the system is set up, it actually discourages the development of safer, more natural treatments.
They argue that the current system is built around managing the toxicity of synthetic drugs rather than finding ways to avoid that toxicity in the first place.
Right.
They even have a memorable phrase for it.
Okay.
Self-licking ice cream cone.
Wait, self-licking ice cream cone.
Yeah.
I remember that from the article, but can you explain it again?
Basically, they argue that the entire process is a cycle.
Okay.
Synthetic drugs are inherently toxic, so they require tons of testing.
Right.
This leads to a complex regulatory system focused on managing those risks, which further entrenches the use of these toxic drugs.
It's a cycle.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle that benefits the pharmaceutical companies, but may not be serving patients in the best possible way.
So if this cycle is keeping us hooked on potentially harmful medications, what's the alternative?
Well,
can we actually break free?
That's what we're going to explore next.
Okay.
The authors do offer some solutions, but they require a radical shift in how we think about healthcare.
I'm ready to hear it. Let's dive into those solutions.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've laid out this rather bleak picture.
Yeah.
That the system might be incentivized to keep us reliant on synthetic drugs that are by design more likely to be toxic.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well,
is there a way to break free from this self-licking ice cream cone, as the authors call it?
The authors do offer some solutions, and this is where their expertise really shines. Remember, we're talking about a biotech CEO and a leading medical researcher.
Yeah.
They're not just complaining. They're actively working on alternatives.
Okay, so it's not just theoretical doom and gloom.
Yeah.
What kind of alternatives are we talking about?
They advocate for a much deeper understanding of the body's own signaling mechanisms.
Okay.
Instead of trying to force synthetic molecules to do a job they're not well suited for, what if we could work with those incredibly precise natural processes we were talking about earlier?
So harnessing the power of those natural agonists.
Exactly.
The ones our bodies already know how to use.
And they believe that a deeper understanding of quantum biology and how those tiny subatomic interactions contribute to health is going to be essential to making this happen.
I can see how that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it require a complete overhaul of how we approach healthcare? It's a pretty radical departure from the way things work now.
It would be a major shift for sure.
Yeah.
Think about it. Instead of waiting until someone is sick and then trying to manage their symptoms with drugs, imagine a system that's focused on creating the conditions for optimal health from the start.
So less about fighting disease and more about proactively supporting the body's own ability to heal itself.
Right. This means really understanding a person's unique genetic makeup, their lifestyle, their environment, and then tailoring interventions to address their specific needs.
It sounds like a completely personalized approach.
Yeah.
Almost like having a custom-designed health plan from the moment you're born.
That's the idea. Imagine a world where your doctor doesn't just prescribe the same drug for everyone with a particular condition, but instead analyzes your unique biochemistry and recommends a plan that could involve lifestyle changes, targeted nutritional therapies, or even therapies that utilize those natural agonists we talked about earlier.
That's incredible, but let's be realistic.
Sure.
Is that kind of healthcare even accessible to the average person?
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly expensive and time-consuming.
Those are valid concerns, and the authors address them directly. They argue that this kind of personalized approach might seem expensive at first. But the long-term cost savings would be enormous if we can prevent chronic diseases from developing in the first place. It's going to save everyone a lot of money and suffering in the long run.
It's cheaper to keep people healthy than to treat them once they're already sick.
Exactly.
I guess that's the core of preventative care.
And they're optimistic that advances in technology, especially in areas like genomics and artificial intelligence, are going to make this kind of personalized healthcare more affordable and accessible over time. Imagine a future where a simple blood test could reveal your predisposition to certain diseases. And doctors could use that information to create a truly personalized plan to keep you healthy.
That almost sounds like science fiction. But you're right, technology is advancing so rapidly.
It is.
It's hard to even imagine what might be possible in a few years, let alone a few decades.
And the authors point out that this kind of shift wouldn't just benefit individuals, it could transform our entire approach to drug development.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about how expensive and time-consuming those toxicology trials are for synthetic drugs?
Yeah.
Well, if we're focusing on substances that the body already recognizes and knows how to process safely, those trials could become much simpler and less risky.
So it would speed up the development of new treatments and potentially make them much more affordable.
Exactly. It could be a win-win for patients and for the healthcare system as a whole.
It's a pretty compelling vision, and I'm curious to hear what our listeners think.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like the current system isn't serving your needs? Maybe you've experienced side effects from a medication?
Yeah.
Or wish there was a more personalized approach to your health?
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Remember, the full article is linked in the show notes. It's definitely worth a read.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of the discussion,
Sure.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
This idea that a deeper understanding of quantum biology could hold the key to unlocking a whole new era of medicine.
Yeah.
It's still a pretty new field, right?
It is, but even in its early stages, it's revealing some incredible things about how our bodies work at the most fundamental level.
Right.
And the authors believe that the more we understand about those intricate subatomic interactions, the better equipped we'll be to develop truly effective and personalized treatments.
It's almost like we've been trying to understand a complex machine by looking at it from the outside.
Right.
And now we're finally starting to peek under the hood and see all the intricate gears and mechanisms that make it work.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the authors believe that by embracing this more nuanced and sophisticated approach, we can move beyond simply managing symptoms and start to address the root causes of disease in a much more effective and sustainable way.
So a real paradigm shift in how we think about health and healthcare.
Yeah.
It's a bold vision, but a compelling one.
Absolutely.
What would this future look like in practice?
That's a great question to explore as we move into the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll try to paint a picture of what this new paradigm could look like in the real world.
We've been talking about a pretty radical shift in how we think about healthcare.
Yeah.
Moving away from synthetic drugs and towards a more personalized, holistic approach.
Yeah.
Even harnessing the power of quantum mechanics.
Absolutely.
It's an exciting vision, but how would that actually play out in the real world?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And the authors of Toxic by Design don't just leave us hanging with a theoretical ideal.
Right.
They offer some specific examples of what this new paradigm could look like in practice.
So walk me through it.
Okay.
If we were to step into this future they're envisioning, what would we see?
Well, imagine going to the doctor for your annual checkup. But instead of just checking your blood pressure and weight, they take a detailed genetic profile and analyze your microbiome. The trillions of bacteria that live in your gut.
Okay, that's definitely different from my usual checkups.
Yeah.
But what would they do with all that information?
They would use it to identify potential risks and create a truly personalized prevention plan.
Okay.
Let's say you have a genetic predisposition to a certain type of heart disease.
Okay.
Instead of waiting for symptoms to appear and then prescribing medication, they could recommend specific dietary changes, supplements, or even therapies that utilize natural agonists to help regulate your cholesterol and blood pressure.
So it's about addressing the root causes of disease before they even have a chance to take hold.
Exactly. And this approach wouldn't just apply to physical health.
Okay.
They also envision a much greater emphasis on mental and emotional well-being, understanding how stress, trauma, and lifestyle factors can impact our overall health.
It sounds like a much more holistic approach.
Yeah.
Recognizing that our minds and bodies are interconnected.
Yeah.
And can't be treated in isolation.
Absolutely. And this is where those advances in technology we talked about earlier come into play.
Okay.
Imagine wearable sensors that track your vital signs in real time. Artificial intelligence that analyzes your medical history and identifies patterns. Even virtual reality programs that help you manage stress and anxiety.
It's almost like having a personal health coach available 24/7.
That's right.
But wouldn't all this technology create a surveillance state where our privacy is compromised?
That's a valid concern, and the authors address it directly.
Okay.
They emphasize the importance of data privacy and ethical considerations. This kind of personalized healthcare can only work if people trust that their information is being used responsibly
Right.
and that they have control over how it's shared.
So transparency and control are key.
Absolutely.
But even if all this technology is available, how would we make it accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy?
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
And it's one the authors spend a lot of time discussing.
Right.
They argue that the cost of healthcare would actually go down in the long run.
Okay.
Because we'd be preventing so many expensive chronic diseases.
Right.
And they believe that as technology advances,
Yeah.
the cost of personalized therapies and diagnostics will continue to drop, making them more accessible to everyone.
It's a pretty radical vision.
It is.
But it's one that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If we can shift our focus from managing disease to actually creating health,
Right.
the potential benefits are enormous.
Absolutely. And they believe it's not just a pipe dream.
Yeah.
They're already seeing promising results in their own research with natural agonists and personalized therapies.
Okay.
They believe that with enough investment and a willingness to challenge the status quo,
Right.
we can make this vision a reality.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to a different way of thinking about healthcare.
Yeah.
One that's more focused on prevention,
Absolutely.
personalization,
Yeah.
and harnessing the incredible power of our own bodies.
I think that's the goal
Yeah.
of the article.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. And I think that's the whole point, isn't it? To
Yeah.
encourage people to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and really engage with the complexities of healthcare.
Because at the end of the day, it's our health, the most precious thing we have.
Absolutely.
And we deserve a system that prioritizes our well-being and empowers us to make informed decisions.
I agree.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe that future of personalized quantum-powered healthcare isn't as far off as we think.
It might be closer than we realize.
That's a thought I'll definitely be carrying with me. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
Thanks for having me, Mia.